Welcome to TAMA Talks, brought to you by the Torrance Art Museum Advocates. I'm Janine Madden, the current TAMA president, and I'd like to thank you for tuning in. Today's talk will feature work currently on view at the Torrance Art Museum. Baker's Dozen is on view in the main gallery. It's a survey show of 13 artists whose work made an impression on the curators in this last year. These 13 reflect current directions in Southern Californian contemporary art practices. The show closes on Saturday, June 17th, so be sure to stop by if you're in the area. TAM hours are Tuesday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. The museum is located at 3320 Civic Center Drive in Torrance. And because it is a municipal museum, it's a program of the City of Torrance Cultural Services Division of the Community Services Department. Admission to the museum is free, but donations are greatly appreciated and accepted. We have a little box right when you first walk in. You can find the TAM on the web at www.torranceartmuseum.com. This discussion is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel with all of our previous TAMA talks. You can access that from our website, www.tamadvocates.com. Today's guest is artist Alicia Piller. She is a Los Angeles-based mixed media artist who was born and raised in Chicago and received her bachelor's in both fine arts and painting, Anthropology from Rutgers University in 2004. While working in the fashion industry and living a decade in New York City and 3.5 years in Santa Fe, New Mexico, she cultivated her distinctive sculptural voice. Continuing to expand her artistic practice, Alicia completed her MFA focused on sculpture and installation from Cal Arts in May of 2019. So we really want to thank you so very much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm
so happy that your work is in this exhibition and excited to hear about it. So we'll go through the slides and have you explain a little bit about the work to us.
Awesome. Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Excited to be a part of the show. Also, it's one of my favorite places to see art in LA, in the LA area.
Great, great. Okay, so this is your piece, and I'll have you tell us as much as you'd like about it. That's wonderful. I love how it's juxtaposed with the piece in the back, Suzanne Bybee's piece in the back. Very cool.
Yeah. This is one of my I have two works in the show. This one's called Internal Framing, Yoked, Subdued. And sometimes I go in with an idea already in hand and I execute it. And we'll have a better example of that in the other piece that we look at. But this one was really special because it was just this organic process of me working with parts and pieces and shapes that I already had in my sort of repertoire of materials. And what I end up doing a lot is sort of playing and repurposing, and not just repurposing, trash or items that have been thrown away, but really even repurposing my own materials and deconstructing a sort of installation and then reconfiguring it. So this was a really good example of that process. And I was really thinking about making a figurative work. I'm very abstract. I like to, focus on the energy surrounding a subject and energy surrounding a history. And this was just one of those moments of me just wanting to play with the idea of the figure. And I kind of started doing that a little bit during 2020. My work shifted and I was working on masks. And so, and putting them on my actual body. But I haven't really done a classic sort of figure. And not that this is classic, but, I just wanted to test the waters and see what came out. And so here, basically, I'm using a lot of, like I said, the past materials, which for me, You see a lot of balloons. I used to, way back in the day, for 7 years of my life, I was a clown with my mom. And so that material of using latex balloons has sort of just become a part of my sort of, material language. And, so the bottom is these palm fronds. And so that is really like a classic sort of understanding of me living in Southern California, me sort of absorbing all of these materials that are around me to tell a story. And so I like I said, it's a figure. And so you can see the insides of this guy, or whatever pronoun you want to use for her, him. um there's these a chain around the sort of neck, and really what I'm trying to embody, or trying to discover material wise, is sort of anxiety around living in this country right now. I wake up every day and I'm looking at the news, and I feel it's like a suffocating feeling of knowing that, like, if you're queer, if you're a person of color, if you're this, you're that, you're Jewish, I'm half black, it's like, I'm there's these all these angles of anger and racism and um just everyday tragedies that we kind of all have to deal with. And so this figure is that for me, playing with emotion and how to create a sense of like sorrow with all of these crazy materials that I'm using. The actual body itself was, like I said, from a past installation, and that installation, it was in its first iteration a circus stump, and thinking about like just politics as a circus. And so I decided to repurpose it as the body, because it just felt there's these internal, once we go through the slide, you'll see the insides of this body and this sort of like grotesqueness created from using resins and latex. And so I'm using these toxic materials, um, and natural materials purposely, because that is the world that we're in. I can't escape the fact that plastics are just a part of our day to day. But also when I walk in the neighborhood, when I'm walking anywhere, I'm also noticing nature and nature's processes. And so a lot of times I'm mimicking or attempting to mimic these natural processes. And so, yeah, I mean, I could keep going, but I
Yeah,
was,
let's, like you said, let's explore a couple of different angles.
yeah.
So
So,
it's
yeah,
nice that as you walk around it, you really get a completely different, almost a completely different object with each view.
yes. And that is something that like I hope to do more of. I want to create works that you can like enter in with your body. So I'm starting that here, where I'm allowing the viewer to see the inside of the body, to feel the sort of, I do like playing with beauty and the sort of grotesque, and sort of drawing the viewer in with these details. And like every part of my works, no matter how tiny the shapes and forms are to the biggest shape, they are touched, they are wrapped. And that's a big part of my aesthetic, is using fabrics, and mostly vinyl at this point, to wrap every form. And those wrappings become like the sinew, the muscle, the tissue that connects these organisms. So I'm building these things in like a cellular way.
It's a very visceral piece.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's sort of science fictiony, but also
Mm,
just yeah. So
exactly. That's very my world. And
okay.
and it comes out in sometimes it's more obvious than other times. Like, again, the next work we will see is a little more like beautiful, until you start really getting into the detail, and you might find some things. But this one is definitely like hitting you as like, whoa, what is this guy? And um I don't know, I like to play with those emotions when I'm working on a object.
Sure. And it does have that sort of, our brain kind of is, what is it, anthropomorphizing, that has a head and a body and two arms and legs or more than several legs, and that we do sort of turn it into something,
Exactly.
even though
Yeah.
nothing like this exists anywhere
Yes.
except your imagination. So this is a separate piece.
Yes. So, actually, if we could go to the next slide to see, this is sort of the back of this work.
This here.
Yeah, let's keep on going. Yes. Okay. So this is what I consider the front of this piece, even though it is a 360 view, like you can walk around it.
Yes.
But I do sometimes have, where I start a piece sort of dictates what I think is the front or back. And so this work is a giant palm frond,
Oh,
and I do a lot of urban hiking and collecting of not just nature but things, but nature's always in the forefront. And so I literally ran to get this piece
oh,
because I saw other people eyeing it. And I mean, it was giant and it was just so unusual to see. I mean, you definitely see giant palm fronds all over, but this I had never, and I was like, this is special.
yes.
So this work is called Rejuvenate Drafts, Templates, Master Plan. And, just to speak to the title a little bit, titles in general, is that I do like to clue the audience or the viewer in to where I'm going with things. Because I am working in a very abstract way, it's not always clear immediately. And I do want there to be I want people who are maybe not even in the art world to be able to enter in some way.
Sure.
So the title is really reflecting drafts, templates, master plan. I'm really thinking about recreating a new planet, a new home, a new place. And so to do that, there's this tying in directly to nature. And on the back part of this work is all blueprints, all me repurposing a I live near a architecture firm, and so sometimes I get to dig through the trash a little bit and find some gems. And so the back of this work has these blueprints and floor plans for a new home. And so
Is it this portion?
yeah.
Okay.
Mhm. And so this is the back of the work, and it's hanging in such a way that you're able to really step into it. It's almost like the size of a wall. And so the details zooming in are me using those blueprints, but also me incorporating these aspects of nature. I live in Inglewood, California, and I go around photographing tons of things, but a lot of times it's the nature that I'm seeing because it's everywhere. And I'm growing up in Chicago in the Midwest. There were not jacaranda purple trees everywhere. There were not hibiscus plants, growing everywhere, passion fruit flowers, and they're kind of ignored here. I
Right.
feel like when I tell family from the Bay, like, oh my God, the nature, they're like, what nature? Like they're so used to it.
Right.
And for me, it's like this just magical blending of city and nature together, and I seeing like one plant, one little flower growing in a crack. I mean, I'm like, wow, it's so cool. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so there's that excitement for the nature, but also the recreation and the reconfiguring of our nation to something better. So this is more of a hopeful work. And the detail image that I included has an image of, yes, of people protesting. Um,
Yes.
there's it was a shot taken at a march, and actually, I think it wasn't even in California, but to me, I'm really talking about Americana. So I'm not always totally like this is all California based. Yes, the palm frond is,
Right. But
but
it's very national when you think about it.
exactly, exactly. And so I like to sort of clue you into a full narrative, a full story. And so these images of the protests were really key for me in terms of telling this story of recreation, of building from the ground up a new place. And so, yeah, this one is actually these two works are um very new. I'm a workaholic, but this year I've been so busy and was so blessed to have a solo show at a museum. I've just been so busy that I usually am making more and more. So this was like um really special because I was very focused on these two works this year, and instead of spreading myself out. And so I was so excited to be able to show them. Sometimes I don't know where these things are going to go, but it just worked out that I was lovingly asked to be a part of this Baker's Dozen show. And um the space itself is
Yes.
what really I just love so much, because the Torrance Art Museum gives you, like, there's enough room to experience and move in and out of a work. And then on top of that, having these other amazing artists nearby that, like, we're speaking to each other.
Right. So I'm going to go back actually to this this piece here, because this is the second piece
Yes, yes,
in right next to it.
exactly.
So
I just
that's really cool to
and I
have.
had no idea how they would
Yeah.
do these
Yeah.
things. But to me, sometimes the magic comes too from what is the piece doing with these other pieces, And so um,
Right.
it was this lovely framework slash backdrop for this sort of sorrowful figure, just
Right.
and then you have this uplifting work that's off the
Hopeful.
ground. And yeah, I mean, it just I wasn't thinking that, but it, like, totally is exactly what it should be.
Right. Right. And that's ideal, right? So
Yeah.
let me go through. So this is the blueprint piece, the
Hmm.
back of that. And then there's more images here too.
Yeah, those are the nature, me
Ah,
framing nature, little moments of nature throughout the
okay.
neighborhood. And I that this work also has these elements of time in terms of my life. The nature shots, which I'm so sorry I don't have close-ups of those moments, but they're also framed in themselves around, like, repurposed material. And I used to work at a factory doing industrial screen printing in Inglewood, like during the pandemic, like during COVID. And it was a tough job, but it was also just like I was grateful to have it. But at the same time, I was also collecting, collecting my trash, collecting my, and I'm always doing that no matter what. But um these sort of off-white sort of framing moments are like literally that time in my life. And also, as I'm thinking about it, it's like me building a new life from that moment, which
Right.
really goes with the concept of the whole work.
And what's interesting, you were talking earlier about this desire to kind of, enter into the work. And it's so, at least from a docent perspective, that's that's what we don't want people to do. So it's really hard on these beautifully sculptural pieces where you actually can kind of meander, but the back of our brain is like, there's still this space that you want to
Yeah.
keep between it and to respect the work. So
Yes,
all
yes.
right, let's see. This was very it, for me. When I was going to school, the building that I spent a lot of time in had a very large skeleton of a whale hanging in it with the big
Ooh.
science building. And so when I first saw this, I actually really thought it was some sea creature skeleton. It was very I don't know if it's maybe just the shape, or did you find it in this shape?
Yeah, this was in its shape. And
Wow.
I let things, especially when it comes to the natural materials, I let them die. I let them
Okay.
sit out for like a year in the sun and just let them
Oh,
deteriorate as much as they can.
wow.
But what's crazy about you saying the whale thing is that I do have a work um that unfortunately I don't have an image of right now, but it was a whale carcass that you could,
Oh,
like, the shape of that that you could, as a
Yes.
human being, walk into, and all of the bones were
Yeah.
basically me highlighting news headlines from the past 200 years of gun violence and racism. So like I that form of a whale, I do have a even though I'm very into like earth nature, the ocean and all of these
Yes.
earth elements are like very integrated. Yeah.
Right. Right. It's like an ecological,
Yes.
yes,
And we as humans, we are a part of that
we
ecology.
are.
So that's why I just think it's really important, for my practice, that I'm constantly pushing these two things together.
Right. Now, this piece, I think this is kind of the view inside it moving. So cool. I'm gonna
And
act, go
just
ahead.
to speak to because I as I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh yeah, there's these other things. The the blue. I tend just to speak about color. Um, I'm not always. That's not always on the forefront of my mind about like, oh, I need to make a thing that's this color. It's never that. It's usually form that calls me, but I do find that I'm drawn to these sort of red, white, and blue motifs that
Interesting.
sometimes they, push into a different type of blue or more of a pink, but they're always in this sort of red, white, and blue vein. Um, and the arms, if you will, of the piece, and this sort of back part with the pink and the white. That's a form I feel like as artists we've seen a lot through Jeff Koons, like he did the tulip, and that's that shape over and over, but using generic skin tones. And
I
so I was
see.
really
Okay.
thinking about this sort of like what is race and it's
Right.
a construct and we've created it and what are these generic little Crayola box tones. So just to speak to like where the color schemes are sort of, or the origin.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I spoke with James Gilbert yesterday, and his piece that's in the show, I would have to go back to my notes to see it, but it's basically exactly what you just said. It's this idea that, we've kind of gotten ourselves into the situation that we've gotten ourselves into. And really that political, environmental um, vein, really thread runs through all of the pieces of the artists that I've spoken to already. So,
Wow, I love that.
what is the what are these made from? This portion, can you see it on my cursor?
Yeah, so that's the balloon, the generic skin.
Oh, the balloons, right? Okay, okay,
And so those are, like I said, this whole piece kind of has been repurposed from different parts of different
okay,
things.
yes.
It was a part of a giant installation called Birth of the Racist, and so I just had like these skin tones sort of like bursting out of a warped American flag, and so yeah, it's literally me by one making these tulip forms with balloons and then resining them over and over and over and over
I
again.
see. Okay. Yeah, that's just a spectacular
Thank you.
view. I wish it was longer.
Yes,
So
I'm
not
sorry.
ready to get there yet. So this was the detail. I want to make sure we cover everything. Um, and that's so interesting. How long then would it take you to from the point that you find the palm frond, and you were saying that you sometimes would leave them out for a year. So when
Yeah,
you see it, do you imagine exactly what it's going to be, or does it go through several iterations?
it's both. It's both. I mean,
Okay.
this one in particular, no. I just knew that the frond was so spectacular, and
Yes.
I like it just standing next to. I mean, it's huge, and so I did not have a clue, but I let him sit outside for a while, and something in me, just is like, okay, it's time, get her in here. Let's get let's
Yes.
see what
Yes.
they want themselves to be. But other times I definitely have an idea. So it really just depends. And I don't
Sure.
really regulate that. I just let it flow.
Yeah, as you should, as you should. And so here it is in the gallery. So if you come out to the Torrance Art Museum, then this is the front entrance.
Yes.
So it is right there when you walk in, which is fantastic.
Yes, I'm so honored.
Yeah, that is wonderful. That is great. We're it's up for another week, 2 weeks, I think. It comes down the
Yeah,
17th.
17th. Time is flying. This year is flying by. So if
It's
you haven't seen it, get there. Also, I just want to plug Lori Lipton's drawings. Oh my God, magic. And
really, we're gonna talk with her
oh,
tomorrow. So
oh,
I'm
well,
so
please tell her
excited.
I'm such a fan. I'm like, oh, so amazing.
I will. And that's the other thing that Max really, at least that I've learned over time, is that when he has these shows that have a lot of different people in them, but they all sort of have some sort of a similarity, and
Hmm.
perhaps maybe it is just an artistic, maybe it's just something that many contemporary abstract artists are possessing in the climate in which they live. But I think that he does. He wants to establish those relationships. Who was I talking about? Oh, Suzanne yesterday. And we were just saying how, how the work interacts with each other and how cool it would be to do a little, Brady Bunch Zoom for all of
Yeah.
us in the show.
Yeah.
That if, especially if you couldn't get there on, if you couldn't get there for the opening reception, I would love to talk to Max. And I know it's kind of tricky with timing and everything, but oftentimes I'll have a panel discussion
Hmm.
where several of the artists will come in and talk about their work. I have not yet done a TAMA talk where I've had more than one artist on. Some of the first ones we did do that. They were cool because everybody sort of waited, so they
Yeah.
each had their little say about what they did, and then they kind of meshed and picked up on each other's work. But it's great to hear that about Lori Lipton's drawings in Gallery 2. So
Yes. Oh.
we'll hear about that tomorrow. I'm gonna head to my and make sure there's nothing else that you wanted to just want to go through them again. And the color, like, oh. This would be a wonderful piece to, previously the art museum had a program called Stories in Art. And
Mm.
so this would be it was really predominantly for homeschool kids who are
Oh
homeschooled.
wow.
And they
Okay.
would come into the gallery and we'd read them a story, art related story, and then we'd bring them into the gallery and they'd have an opportunity to look, but I'd always pick a few pieces for them to talk about. And this would be like at the top of my list
Thank you.
because
I love that.
there's so much in it, and it possesses a quality that, like you were saying, you really, I would have a hard time. They would have to have hands in their pockets because I could know that they would want to be touching those little
I know
balloons.
I need to make a work that's touchable just because, it'd be fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So fantastic.
Thank
So
you.
thank you. I really appreciate you coming out, and just one of the main reasons why we do this, I think, is that there's only so much you can fit on a label.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
in order to understand that work, and particularly its relationship to you, and I love actually the fact that it's comprised of your other work. You've
Yes.
sort of cannibalized your other work to create
Exactly.
new
I
work.
love that word. Yes.
Yeah, and it's on many levels. I mean, it's great from an environmental level, right? But also just that idea that it moves from one to another. Deborah Lynn Ermis, who did the crocheted pieces,
Yes.
she was saying how she will find an element in a series and then pick that element and use it to create the whole next series.
Nice.
So picking up, like having some continuation from one piece or one series to the other is just fantastic. So
Thank you. Yes.
thank you. So I'm just going to thank everybody for watching. And like I said, we'll post this on our YouTube channel. So appreciate you tuning in today.